Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking Podcast. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking Podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Lauren Maylor is the Creative Director of Loft. Loft provide a one-stop interior design and furnishing solution service from concept through to completion, working across the student accommodation, hospitality and residential sectors. Spoke to Lauren in May 2021 via Zoom. In this episode we discover how in-house design helps clients work within their budgets, how multi-use furniture can help facilitate different ways of working and living, the importance of fostering human connection and building communities, and why designers should get to know board sizes and sheen levels. Thanks for joining me today. I was really interested in your position and your role as a designer with your company and what that entails. Can you tell me a bit about what your role is?
Yeah, so actually I've moved into a new role about 4 weeks ago. So I'm Creative Director for Loft. I was head of design. So I've moved into more of a role whereby I'm looking at the design output from the whole business as opposed to just that department. So it's just making sure that we have consistency through our product, through our marketing, some of our collateral, our assets, the way we style on projects, supporting the marketing team in terms of their photography. So we have a photo studio now that we've created during lockdown. So we create some lifestyle shoots from our head office. So it's really a case of working collectively with all departments to make sure that we're aligned to create the best sort of design solutions for our clients. So it's a really interesting role. It's brand new. It's been creative as we've developed as a business. There's been that requirement to sort of bring the departments closer together. And then I'm obviously working closely with the design team. We have 6 designers and a head of design who I work very, very closely with to make sure that we're producing brilliant designs for our clients on time, on budget. So it's a really interesting role. I'm really enjoying it so far. So
sounds very exciting. And Loft as a company, they're known for explain a little bit. My perception is that they're essentially supplying furniture as the core of their business, but you've got all these design services as part of the package, haven't you?
Yes. So for people who don't know Loft as a business, we're just about to celebrate our 18th birthday. So it's a family-run business, and it was created really with landlords and agents in mind. So it was furnishing for student accommodation, lettings, and it's developed into quite a large business now. So we have different arms of the business. And recently, in the last 3 years, we've created a design team within the business because there was that natural progression from our clients requiring design services that supported the furnishing solutions that we were providing. So we stock thousands of products in our warehouses. We provide a next day furnishing service, but we also provide more of a tailored service for our large sort of project developers where they want a slightly different look for a project. We'll furnish hundreds of their units. Then we'll look at furnishing their amenity spaces via our design team so that we can create quite a cohesive look. So it's a really varied and flexible business. So we tailor the service around our clients, as opposed to one size fits all. And actually with the design team, we can create different looks for different clients and their particular brand to set it apart from others in the in that sector.
And so as a business, you've gone from responding to other people's requirements and maybe fulfilling their design initiative, or working with perhaps architects and designers who specify, but to now being able to design it yourselves on behalf of the client and supply.
Yes.
Do the whole thing essentially.
Yes, that's kind of happened quite naturally. We got to a point as a business whereby we were cost engineering schemes that have been put together by interior designers to get them within budget, which is frustrating. You know, as a designer, you don't want your ideas to be cost engineered and diluted. We've now been able to sort of readjust our service internally so that we can provide the concept upfront that they're going to get when it's delivered. So it streamlines the process slightly, but the advantage of Loft is that we procure, we deliver and we install, and we now design. So we've got the end-to-end process, and that works really well for a number of our clients who want to furnish all the apartments, but maybe an interior designer can't do that, but also have that consistency between the look of the apartments and the look of the amenity and communal spaces. Because I think there can be some sort of disconnect when half is furnished by one company and half is furnished by another, and it can be a case of too many cooks, and it can dilute the overall look of a scheme. Whereas bringing it in-house within Loft, it allows us to kind of control that design process, the procurement process, and make sure that the client gets maximum value for money, but still doesn't have to compromise on the look.
I think you're hitting on one of the big problems within the industry there, that specification moment where the design of you've been working on a really great design and you choose all these bits of furniture and then you realise you can't afford them, or you hand over a design and the contractor goes off and tries to find something similar, or the client takes your design and thinks they can get it cheaper elsewhere. All these sort of things are mitigated by this setup you've got, aren't they? By having that control, because you can specify stuff is going to fit the budget. I suppose that's the key.
That's I think from our experience working with these particular clients, we understand the budgets that they have to hit, and we're trying to sort of close that gap on what they can afford and what that looks like. And actually, I think as a designer, you always want to put in the best you can, but actually if you're not taking into consideration, especially a developer or a fund, their set budget, they need to make sure that goes as far as it can. So by bringing everything in-house within Loft, we can ensure that they are getting the maximum value with the design service we provide, but also not having to sort of pay extra on top for somebody else to procure that product, but also making sure that the durability of the product is fit for purpose as well. So we've got really strong supply chain where we can work directly with the manufacturer. We don't have to go through an agent to source the furniture. We can procure, very well. We can import from the Far East, from Europe, from the UK. We've got a really diverse supply chain that we developed over, not recently, over the last 18 years, that gives us that sort of edge, I think.
Yeah. It's knowing what's out there. I think that's the challenge for designers, is what products are actually available, how much do they cost, and how good are they? Not from an aesthetic point of view, but in terms of performance. Because in student accommodation, of course, one of the big problems I've seen is that the first iteration of a design that gets installed gets broken, and then the operator can't afford to replace it with the same product, and you just don't know whether they're going to perform well or last long enough. But you've got that knowledge built into the whole business?
Yes, I think, we're very much a design focused business, but actually an additional strength we have is our product and buying team. So we work closely with them to kind of feed through what the client wants, but actually it can look great, but like you say, if it breaks, it hasn't done its job. We haven't fulfilled the client's brief. But if we can make sure that product looks good and is robust and is made of the right materials, whether that be the fabric, especially in student accommodation, we do have a number of clients who have a particular specification of product where they don't want the cushions to come off because they don't want those to get flung around or whatever, or dragged into the amenity space. So we work with our clients, but we also work with our product development and buying teams to make sure that it looks great, but it does the job at the right price. And then I suppose as Loft as a business, we're able to then, as part of the process, 4 or 5 years down the line, we might be able to then collect and replenish that product based on the lifetime, really. So we do that end-to-end process, but then we go back into it and replenish what's been installed originally.
So you've got more ability to take ownership of that support over the lifetime of the product.
Yes. Yeah. We're not, we don't sort of deliver and then go, there you go, move on. We actually invest that time in the clients, really, to make sure that we're able to support them through the lifetime of that scheme, really. Which is, I think, quite a nice reflection on, we just don't want to furnish it and then bye, see you later, move on to the next. We actually invest in those relationships to make sure that we can support them as and when they need, even simple things like one mattress. If somebody's been, particularly hard wearing on, furniture within an apartment, we can go in and just do one or a full block again. So yeah, we can be really diverse in terms of how we support our clients.
What's your background in terms of education then, and where were you before?
Yeah, so I did come in, there was an existing design team, but I came in to sort of manage it based on my experience. I studied at university in Manchester, graduated about 15 years ago. I'm showing my age now. Back in 2006, I think it was, I graduated, and then quite quickly was able to find a role within design. So I started actually for a company called Lugo, and we worked in hotel design. So we were working with some of the large chains like De Vere and Ramada. So I started as their junior designer, and I learned a lot about contract furniture there. And I think that sort of paved the way for sort of my take on interior design, because it's probably not your traditional, go into an architect's practice in the interior design department. Mine's sort of very much furniture focused. So I joined there, actually got itchy feet quite quickly, and got headhunted by one of their suppliers, who was a really small startup company. Actually, it was two guys who'd graduated from Edinburgh University, and they were product and furniture designers, and they'd set up this business. And some of the furniture that they were designing and manufacturing themselves for the contract industry, they were working on nightclubs and bars, and they were supplying the company that I left with furniture. But I could see the actual design process, the creation of the products, and some of them were just next level. And they approached me because they wanted to start at the interior design arm of that business. So I moved, and it was incredible. We worked out of a horrible Victorian warehouse in the back end of Wolverhampton. It wasn't glamorous, but they had a woodworking shop. They had a seamstress, and I worked there for a couple of years and learned so much. They had me in the in the woodworking shop, helping to, deep button a sofa at one point so we could hit a deadline. So it was hands-on, but it enabled me to kind of see the manufacturing side of interior design, and the deadlines and the materials, and some of the exciting projects we worked on included a bar in Verbier. We did all the fitted banquette seating. We kitted out a really cool bar in Soho, called the Green Carnation. So we created this huge circular bespoke sofa in Designers Guild, heavy flock fabric. And then unfortunately the recession hit and they had to sort of make some cuts, and unfortunately I was made redundant, and then the company sort of ceased trading sort of 6 months later. So I found myself scrabbling around for design jobs. I think it was a very tricky time for anybody in design during the recession of, I think it would have been '08. Lots of these architects' practices were laying people off. So I ended up actually in that bathroom design. So in retail, I thought I can't not have a hand in design. So I joined a well-known bathroom company and learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot during that year, but it was a stepping stone until I could find something a bit more suitable. I then moved into luxury fitted furniture. Again, I worked for a manufacturer, high-end joinery company just outside of Manchester. And I think I learned the most during that time. I was there for 3 years. And they had some really strong relationships with a number of luxury interior designers, some developers. And we were working on some of these multi-million-pound properties in Cheshire. So I then got to see a completely different side of the industry, and it was working very closely with a local interior designer to me now, and having this exposure to different types of suppliers at different price points, and going into luxury interiors was, a real sort of eye-opener. We were working on a number of sort of high net worth individuals' properties. It gave me that ability to learn how to design fitted furniture, kitchen design, even things down to, staircases, all the internal joinery. So it was, again, adding another string to my bow in a way.
Sounds like a really good mix of skills there. I mean, it might have sounded a bit sort of scary and haphazard, but
yeah,
built a whole series of skills, like how things are made. I think that's just a massively important thing for interior designers, is to understand how things are actually built.
I think knowing the simplest things like board sizes and thicknesses and the types of materials and sheen levels and RAL colors, those kind of details that you don't necessarily pick up from a textbook. Actually, walking around a joinery factory and understanding the different types of joiners. We had an incredibly talented cabinet maker. He used to do these beautiful designs, all the inlays. He's since moved on to a different company, but I've seen some of his work quite recently where he's created this sort of, 10-meter long table. And it's just, the beauty of it is, I don't think many people get exposed to that sort of variety of products.
Yeah. It's also knowing where to get things made, isn't it? People that can do things.
That's it. At the right price, I suppose. If you've got a client who can afford to go to that level, having that, having access to that sort of network of suppliers. But also, I suppose, the other end of the spectrum is making, that budget go as far as it can for people who haven't got, unlimited, pounds to spend. So, it's been really diverse. So that, I probably left there in about 2012. And then I sort of moved more into, I did a little bit of freelancing, which was very scary. But again, I suppose that sort of threw me in at the deep end a little bit in terms of sort of understanding the financial side of interior design and how to maximize, your skill set to bring in revenue and to build those trusted network with sort of clients and suppliers. And then I moved into sort of residential property for a very similar company to Loft. I worked there for 5 years, kind of moved up the ranks, and then had the opportunity to join Loft in 2019. I'd actually gone off for a year on maternity leave, so I came back sort of straight in at the deep end, managing a team of 6 talented designers. So my first management role. So again, that was quite interesting to kind of get my head around. And it's just been a case of refining the process, maximizing the team's skill set, sort of putting them in the right place to provide career progression and to really build a portfolio of work that supports what we stand for.
That portfolio, as it builds, has it changed in the nature of the work that you've been doing over time?
It has, yeah. So since I joined Loft, they just opened up a London branch, and the London market is slightly different. So Loft is based in Manchester. It's a Manchester-based business, but to kind of keep up, we opened up a warehouse in London and a central London showroom, and we built a design team down there as well. So we were able to look at different opportunities at different price points. So the London design team have created some incredible projects at a different level to what we've done in Manchester. I mean, Loft as a business covers the whole of the UK, so we are nationwide and we do travel to carry out works. But a number of the projects at the London design team, they've been able to really push the boundaries and actually elevate the design. And we've just completed a project in Chelsea Waters, and that's 3 show apartments, and they are just next level. So they compete with the London designers, and it shows that spectrum that we can work on. We're not a one-trick pony. We don't just work at student. We can now cover such a diverse range of projects for different clients. One day we can be kitting out a small marketing suite for a student accommodation provider. The next day we're, installing in Chelsea. So it shows that we can be flexible in how we approach different projects.
Sounds like a really nice balance, that. And in terms of your team, how do you interact with your customer then, your client? And is that part of the supply service then, or are you billing? Well, you don't have to tell me about your billing. I'm interested in how, that lots of companies put the design in as part of the package. Is that something you do, or what's the way in which you engage, I suppose, with different types of clients?
Every project's different. In terms of the way that the business is structured, we do have a team of sort of account managers and business developers, but we tend to work directly with the client within the design team. I think that works the best if we have a good relationship with our clients to better understand what they require from the project. And then in terms of the way we work, really, on occasion, if we win, a huge scheme, we might provide a marketing suite at a reduced cost potentially. But in terms of design services, we've found that we still need to charge for these, because obviously it can be a standalone service and we kind of can't give out the ideas for free. So we do still charge design services, but it really is on a project by project basis. And then we break down those projects and work out exactly what the client needs and what stage they want to go to. Because it may just be, light interior design whereby we're supporting on specification rather than, the full end-to-end design process through, the technical design stages. So we really have to sort of approach each project individually.
Working perhaps with the client or maybe the contractor or the developer, but do you also work directly with architects and interior designers to implement their schemes?
We do actually, and that's something that it's a tricky thing to sort of talk through because obviously we've got a design team, so we can be seen as a bit of a conflict of interest. But I think the beauty of Loft is we obviously work with these developers. We've established relationships. They may be on a, supply only basis, but we can support their, selected interior designer or architect on the furnishing. So as a design team, we're working on a couple of projects actually that deliver this summer where they've got a nominated interior designer. It's a developer. They want to use this interior designer, but they want to use Loft furniture because they use Loft furniture on all of their schemes. So we're actually, I don't want to say hand-holding, we're supporting and advising what products to put in where, and allowing, the interior designer to select the fabrics and the colours and just working collaboratively as opposed to against. And that's worked really nicely on a number of schemes I've been involved in, whereby we've forged relationships with the architect, with the main contractor, with the creative agents as well, because that's a big one. How that development looks, what the branding's like, what their intention is. We've been able to really build into these sort of mini teams collaboratively and work quite sort of openly and transparently to create the best design for that particular client at the agreed budget. Because I think that's what it comes down to for some of these large schemes is they've got a budget that they can't go over, and they need the team to work together to make sure that every part connects in a way that creates a beautiful interior at the end of the day.
I think that that budgetary thing is really important, isn't it? And I think the position you're in there, closely aligned to the supply chain, gives you that certainty really, and the knowledge to be able to deliver that. In terms of trends in the market and how things are shifting, what's on your mind at the moment? What are you trying to get clients to do, or what are you responding to from the client's perspective that's shifted perhaps?
I think especially over the last 12 months, there's been a real sort of shift in terms of how spaces are used. I think creating interiors that are more flexible, especially, we'll be furnishing apartments with standard, size furniture that has, a sofa has pretty much a single function. You chill out and relax on it. But actually, some of these city centre apartments need that flexibility in terms of the furniture that we provide, so that they have that flexibility to be able to work from home, for instance, because flexible working doesn't seem like it's going to go away. And from a furniture perspective, we need to be able to provide solutions for some of our clients to be able to say, come and live here. You've got space where you can work from home, whether that be in the apartments or in the amenity spaces. So it's a case of looking at multi-use furniture and how that's not going to go away, really. So creating a couple of workspaces within an apartment, especially if it's, two friends who are living together, or creating that space where you could work independently within the amenity space if you needed to go on the telephone or Zoom calls, or that sort of collaborative workspace, which we're seeing a lot of in co-living, where people actually want to go and work in the amenity space to build up their personal network with, other residents within that scheme. I think that's a big part of what's going on is the community element of some of these build to rent schemes and co-living spaces where people are investing in that particular development because they know that there's going to be like-minded people who live there. And actually, if we can support those sort of connections through the way that we furnish the apartments or the amenity spaces, then I think, again, that's not going to go away, this sort of building of smaller communities within communities. So I think that's really mainly the main one that we're looking at, is sort of these ways in which we can sort of foster human connection and ensure that the developer knows that that scheme is going to attract people and keep those sort of retention rates.
Furniture as a facilitator of those behaviours or supporting those behaviours.
Yes. And I think the other side to it is creating sort of flexible options in amenity spaces. So not just having a space that is designated to that one activity. I think it's a case of, especially with furniture, creating a space that can be adapted to the change in activities and trends, because what we're doing this year might change next year, and actually the furniture might not be able to be changed for 5 years. So having that longevity in the design and ability to be able to, alter the space, even if it's sort of a day to night flexibility, that space might be a co-working lounge, but actually in the evening they might want to, have a disco. I don't know. So I think it's working with the client, but also the building operator, and understanding how they want to use that space dictates how that space should be designed. As designers, we can, easily design it with our own, selves in mind, but actually, how's that space? What events are those, operators going to organise week in, week out? And how does that space allow for those events to happen? I think if there's a disconnect there, then you failed as a designer, really, because you're compromising the space and actually the enjoyment that people will get out of that space, because, you might be squished into a corner because there's not a flexible option to carry out, I don't know, beer pong somewhere, or fish and chip night or pizza night. So I think as designers, we really like to get involved with all stakeholders and get their opinion on how that space is going to be operated.
That's that sort of users focused, isn't it? That's really good to hear. I think that there's lots of people designing spaces where they just think, right, let's throw some furniture in and make it look nice, but understanding, as you say, how people are going to be living and working or studying or socializing is really key.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate when you do see a beautiful space that, looks aesthetically pleasing, but actually no one's sitting in it or using it, or they, feel uncomfortable using a space. So I think there's a lot of sort of background design work that needs to happen before putting those ideas down on paper. It's more the communication piece with the client to really unpick what the aspirations are for that particular development.
Are you able to get into that design discussion early enough in the process then to...
Yes, we are. We're finding, I think it's a bit of trial and error, but actually we're finding that, especially with the last sort of 12, 18 months, the ability to get onto these Zoom calls or actually be included in some Zoom calls that you might not necessarily be included in on site. You get to hear some of these conversations from various people. So, for example, I've been on a number of calls with, the developer, the main contractor, the student operator, the interior designer, the architect. So there would be, 12, 13 of us on a call, but the client was very much focused on how the space is going to be used. So a lot of the questions were targeted at the operator. So does that office space provide you with enough desking for your staff? No, we need to include 3 more desks? Does that provide a sitting area when students come in on day one with their mum and dad? Is there enough space for them to sit down and park their bags? Yes, okay, we can adapt that space. So actually, we're looking at the customer journey as opposed to bums on seats. It's more about how that person enters the space. What's their first impression? What information do they need? It takes into consideration the customer service experience, really. And I think as designers, that can be missed because you don't always see or hear how that space is going to be used. I suppose it's like when you design a hotel or a restaurant, for example, do you actually understand what that person does? Like the barman, do you understand what they have to do to create, that cocktail? Have they got enough space? Is there enough space on the back bar? Where's the storage? Those kind of things, I think, translate across all interiors, where you really do have to understand not only the end user, but the person who's working there and how they need to use the space. Because I actually think a lot of people do focus purely on the end user who's going to live there, but don't understand, for example, this rise in Amazon deliveries or courier deliveries. Where does that go? Where's it stored? How far does that person who's on the concierge desk have to walk to go and collect that parcel for the resident? I think it's those sort of changes in use of space and probably trends. I mean, probably wouldn't call, getting packages delivered a trend because it's here to stay, isn't it? But actually taking into consideration the changes in what's happening in the world and how things as simply as having something delivered, how
Definitely
that's within
having an impact, isn't it? I mean,
Oh.
we did a project up in Swansea where they had one of those Amazon delivery cabinets, bright orange it was. I think it was bright orange. And that was fixed. You're thinking, well, we better make sure this scheme matches in with the bright orange Amazon boxes.
That's it.
Counterintuitive in terms of how you might approach a design proposition.
Or you just get some clever screening.
Yes.
Just hide it.
Yeah. But then, and then because you can't move it, then you've got to think about all the people traipsing in and out to collect their little packages.
That's it. So it's these sort of elements that are kind of outside your standard, box ticking.
Yeah.
That it's something that if it isn't implemented at the moment with these new schemes, these historical schemes, I have been in one recently where they don't have a parcel room, and it's unracking in a concierge, and it's so there's just not space for the amount of parcels that are actually being delivered. Even things like people's groceries are being delivered to the concierge, so it's taking into consideration, space, even coolers so that the food can be kept cold. That I think people potentially can miss, these sort of details, but pretty huge elements that can tie into the customer experience. And that's a real plus point for a prospective tenant. Somebody will sign for my parcels. That's brilliant. But if there's not that option, that might be the one thing that makes that prospective tenant go to another scheme. So it does tie back into the design, really.
That's the differentiators. I think those sort of services, like you say, the things that you might not initially consider are quite important, aren't they? It's the quality of life and convenience. And
yeah,
I mean, I love getting parcels, and it's been the last year. It's like, what can I order? And if anything makes that easier, and you do think about the logistics as well of storage. I think that's quite an interesting perspective, really, because a lot of people think about interior design as being this decorative, finishing off a scheme, very visual, but you're looking at it from a functional and practical point of view to start with.
Yes, I think storage is is a big element of interior design when it comes to sort of residential design, especially with some of these apartments and sort of the variation in size of apartments. I think if you don't have enough storage, it can really impact on the resident. You know, they can live in clutter, and it's not good for the mind if there's, you know, nowhere to store your ball gowns or, you know, all your Jimmy shoes. I
I'm
think
always struggling with that. Yeah. Yeah.
but I think a lot of developers are starting to put fitted wardrobes in, which is great because that just maximizes that storage space and allows you to, you know, pop things like your suitcases in, or, you know, your large items that there isn't really anywhere to put. And it just allows people to sort of feel more comfortable and at home, and they can move straight in. And I mean, we do provide you know, wardrobes as part of our, and chest of drawers and ottoman beds, you know, where we do provide, you know, those storage options. And we do tend to sort of push storage beds as an option for developers to make sure that they are providing enough storage for their tenants. But I think there are ways in which you can get really clever with storage within these schemes. So just maximizing as much space as possible. And a lot of the furniture we provide, we do, you know, think, okay, how much could, you know, how many clothes could you fit in here? Could we get a suitcase in here? You know, media storage, is there, you know, a cable port so that you can run your cables into the unit and tuck everything away, and things like extendable tables. You know, if you have friends around, you might not necessarily want to have an extended table all of the time. You might want it condensed, but actually if you've got all your friends around, then you'll want to extend it. So we're always looking at ways in which we can make sure that we're providing through furniture, you know, the most storage really.
Are you able to have an influence on the manufacturers to get them to create the products that suit the, you know, these kind of criteria?
Yeah, so because we've got direct connections with our manufacturers, we can design the product and we can vary the finish. So if a particular client doesn't like an oak, you know, we can put in a walnut, or we could, you know, pick from the whole Kronospan book really what finishes that they want. Maybe a client has had a particular range of furniture from Loft on one of their schemes, loves the furniture but wants it to look different. We can then alter the look, and that can be anything, you know, from the finish, the legs, the handles, but then they know, okay, we can get it within budget, but it's going to give it a completely different look. So that's a real advantage of being able to work directly with the supplier.
What's the most enjoyable part of your job then? Have you got favourite moments or?
Somebody asked me this the other day actually, and I actually said going to site. I don't know, I just get a little bit of a buzz when I go on a building site. It sounds very odd, but I really kind of love to see the building in its sort of infancy. So I love to go into the space that we're going to furnish and actually see, you know, the concrete walls and the guys, you know, the cranes going up, and you're, you know, going up in the hoist. And I don't know whether it's just because it's a bit of a novelty, but I think when you see it, you know, from the ground up, and then you see it when you get to come in and, you know, the flooring goes down and the window treatments go in, and you then get the furniture in, and then you get the team on site to, you know, dress it and make sure that everything's in the perfect place. And then you see the client and their reaction, I think, is incredible actually, because you can show them concepts till they're blue in the face, but actually I think a lot of people can't really understand the full extent of the design until they're in that space. So I probably can't say that there's one bit that is my favorite, but there are lots of little bits that kind of stack up and, you know, make it the most enjoyable kind of job in the world, really. I feel really fortunate to be able to, you know, get up in the morning and be excited about what I'm doing that day or that week, especially with such a fantastic team around me who, you know, they just share the same sort of values and passion to keep the client really, really happy. So
that sounds lovely. I like going to site and actually seeing things being built. I think that's comes back from my furniture days, you know, of crafting away.
I really,
Yeah, but and you're right about space. I think people don't really understand until they see it, do they? And that's that when the scheme comes together. There is that bit when it's half done, and you think this is never going to finish, you know, or how they're going to turn this into this wonderful space. And of course, it always does. But when you see it, when you see the furniture going in, and you know that, and it's very rewarding when a client will say, "Yeah, this is exactly what I want," and I can't believe how great it is. You know, those sort of moments I think are really rewarding.
yeah. I think that the other flip side to that is when you get a client who comes in and it's half done and they go, "Oh, I'm not sure about this," or they see things in isolation and they don't
Yeah.
see it as one space. You know, I did a show apartment, and it was quite a bold show apartment, and the decoration selection was quite out there. I decided I wanted to wallpaper the ceiling with, you know, the tin tile effect.
Yeah.
And it was really bold. And the client came in and there was no furniture, there was no accessories, there was nothing to draw your eye down away from this wallpaper on the ceiling. And they were like, "Lauren, what have you done?" And I said, "No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine." And then it's kind of started to unsettle me a bit. I thought, "My God, what have I done?" But we got the furniture in and it looked stunning. And we actually won an award for it. So it kind of, you know, goes to show that if you do push the boundaries, and not all clients will allow you to do that, but if you have a client that is open to, you know, outside the box thinking, then it can pay off. And it did, thank God, on that one. But I did have a bit of a, "Oh my God, where was my head at? Am I okay? Have I," you know, because you get into this sort of zone as a designer. You think, yeah, this is brilliant, and then they sign it off and you start the installation, and that's when it builds on site. You get a little bit of a, "Okay, is this going to turn out okay?" And it always does. So yeah, that's the flip side to it, I suppose.
That's interesting. I get those moments as well, you know, when you just think, have I made the right decision here? You know what I'm thinking?
You second guess yourself, don't
Yeah,
you?
it's like, what was I thinking? No, or particularly actually recently, we've had jobs that have been so delayed by the circumstances that when you go back to review it, you can't remember why you made that decision in the first place. You know, that's
Yes, we're kind of experiencing that at the moment, sort of those stages of sort of design progression. And then you go, "Oh, hang on a minute, they want to go ahead now." And you think, "Okay." And then you review it again and you think, "Oh, do we need to put in a little bit more, you know, some more sockets here, or do we need to change this?" Or, and because you haven't been in that sort of constant process, it kind of halts your thinking, doesn't it? So it can be quite hard as a creator to get your head back into that project if you think, "Oh God, I designed that 6 months ago, and now maybe I would have done this, or maybe I should change that." And then it kind of starts the process all over again.
it's just the designer, isn't it? In you, you always want to improve, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
make it better. The doubt that one has in what you're doing, you know, I suppose you're always questioning what you're doing, aren't you? That's the whole point of, is this good enough? Is this what will deliver for the client?
I think it's quite an interesting angle really to talk about, because I think as designers, you always have to be seen as the most confident with your choices, but actually it's quite interesting how you work as a designer and how you would design for a client versus how you would design for yourself, because suppose that there's that element of you're handling somebody else's money, really, and those choices that you make, you have to stand by. And it's quite easy to get sort of swept up in, they've got X amount to spend, that's great, but actually you have to make sure that you stay grounded to that the choices that you make aren't just flippantly made because it's not your own money. You have to make sure that the decisions you would make even if it was your own money. You can't take your client for granted, and their budget. You have to make sure that every decision you make is something you would stand by.
Yeah, and also, I guess, whilst you want to make the client happy, you've also got to push them a little bit, haven't you? And that's where that element of doubt, I guess, or you've got to have the confidence in your own thinking process.
I feel like to have that element of doubt is probably a good thing, because you've always got, the little devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. And you just think, okay, these are big decisions. If somebody's spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on furniture, you've got to make sure that it is fit for purpose and it's going to look good. So it's pressure. And I suppose without that little niggle of, okay, I'm not saying you need a wobble, but you need to be able to go, yeah, I have made it. You always have to question yourself to actually instill that confidence.
And I think if you're trying to innovate, you're inevitably going to be going into the realms of the slightly unknown, aren't you?
Yes. That's it. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, is with design, unless you've seen somebody else do it and you replicate what they've done, by creating a unique design, you've almost got that element of, is this going to look good because I've not seen somebody else do it? That was the thing with the ceiling wallpaper. It was before it became fashionable. And there were certain elements that I put into that project which you couldn't access, online. And I was a bit like, oh my God, is this going to go? And it did. But I think because I couldn't go on wherever, Pinterest or the internet, and go, oh, I've seen so-and-so's done it. You go a bit like, I'm really trusting my own sort of creative flair and making sure that it goes. And I think if you follow the process and go with your gut, then generally as designers, you get it right. Clients want your advice. If they didn't want your advice, they do the job themselves. So you can listen to them, but you have to exceed their expectations. You have to give them above and beyond what they were expecting, and actually open their eyes and provide them with options so that they know the reason why they paid you to create that space. They go, okay, I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have thought of those ideas. Anyone can, furnish a space, but does that space function? Does it hit the brief? Does it exceed the brief? If it doesn't, then as a designer, you just haven't done your job properly.
I'd like to thank Lauren for taking the time to speak to me. It's really interesting to see how her experience of working in different companies across the sector and her hands-on approach and understanding of construction and materials has helped inform the way she designs and the way she specifies. The link for Loft with the supply chain is a crucial ingredient in the developing of designs that are fit for purpose but also work within clients' budgets, and their approach to really understand how people operate within space makes their designs function well whilst looking great. That human-centred approach is core to the way we teach interior design at the University of Plymouth. If you'd like to know how to be a kick-ass interior designer, follow the links in the show notes. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for technical support in the setting up of this podcast, Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting for these and our educational podcasts at the University of Plymouth, and Mark Frith for the music. Really like to hear your feedback on the podcast. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website or Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.